Opens with a haunting silence. Aerial shots show sprawling cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, their streets choked with abandoned cars. Traffic lights blink for no one. Billboards hang over empty highways. The once bustling world is dead quiet, except for the wind and the faint cry of distant birds. Humanity is gone. Then we fade to the mountains of California. A man, Isherwood Ish Williams, a young geologist, is deep in the wilderness. He's alone, collecting samples of rocks and soil, documenting erosion patterns. It's a peaceful, ordinary day, but this isolation, this quiet, will soon save his life. As he climbs down a rocky slope, a rattlesnake strikes. The fangs sink into his leg. He collapses, gasping as the venom burns through his body. Ish crawls back to his jeep, injects anti-venom from his field kit, but loses consciousness before reaching safety. For days, maybe weeks, he lies in fevered sleep. The film fades to black. Awakening to the end. When Ish finally wakes, everything has changed. The sunlight through the cracked window feels different, colder, distant. His radio emits nothing but static. His phone has no signal. He staggers outside and finds the road empty. The nearby towns, silos open but deserted. The world looks untouched, yet utterly abandoned, as if humanity evaporated overnight. At first, Ish believes he's in some local disaster zone, a chemical leak, maybe an evacuation. He drives into the nearest town, honking, calling out. No answer. Bodies lie in some homes, decomposed, wrapped in old blankets. Others are gone completely. He turns on the TV, dead channels. Every station is static. The internet is offline. Newspapers on a counter bear a single headline. Open quote, mysterious virus sweeps the globe, state of emergency declared. Close quote realizes he's survived something far greater than he can comprehend. A pandemic that erased civilization. Isolation and madness. Weeks pass. Ish wanders through ghost cities. San Francisco's empty skyline, highways strewn with rusting cars. He scavenges food, gas, water. The silence is overwhelming. Dogs run wild in packs. Nature is beginning to reclaim the streets. Vines climb over gas stations, grass pushes through asphalt. At night, Ish sits beside campfires reading old books and talking to himself. He writes in a notebook, trying to stay sane. Open quote, if the world has ended, what happens next? Does the earth mourn us, or does it simply move on? Close quote. He begins to document what remains. Birds returning to cities, deer in shopping malls, the first signs of Earth healing itself. The horror here isn't blood or monsters. It's the realization that humanity was never needed for the planet to thrive. The first encounter after months of solitude, Ish starts to lose hope. He sets out on a cross-country journey, driving through ghost towns, honking at every intersection, searching for signs of life. Every face he imagines turns out to be a shadow, a trick of the light. Then one morning in the suburbs of what used to be Oakland, he sees movement in a grocery store. A woman, armed with a shotgun. Her name is Emma Williams, a former teacher who's been surviving alone since the collapse. The meeting is tense. Fear, disbelief, relief. For both, seeing another living human feels like waking from a nightmare. At first, they distrust each other. They circle one another like animals, wary and desperate. But the human need for company overcomes fear. They share food, talk about the past, families lost, radio silence, the world before. Emma tells Ish that the virus spread faster than anyone could contain it. Hospitals overflowed, governments fell apart, and in just a few weeks, more than 99% of humanity vanished. No one knows where it came from, a lab leak, a mutation, a punishment from God. But one thing is certain, Earth has moved on without mankind. The weight of the world. As the two survivors travel together, they explore the ruins of civilization. Libraries filled with decaying books, supermarkets now overgrown with moss. Ish begins to notice that nature is taking back control faster than anyone imagined. Coyotes roam free, eagles nest on skyscrapers, rivers run clear again. Emma says softly, maybe this is what the earth wanted, to breathe again. But Ish can't accept it. He's a man of science, of logic. He insists they must rebuild, preserve human knowledge before it's lost forever. He starts collecting books, tools, blueprints, maps, everything he can find. He dreams of rebuilding society. Still, the loneliness gnaws at them. They scavenge radios and batteries, trying to contact anyone at all. Nothing but static. The horror of silence becomes its own monster. Signs of life. One night, while camped near a deserted college campus, they hear something, faint but real, a voice over a broken radio frequency. It's distorted, barely audible, but it says, open quote, "Survivors, North Point safe," close quote. Then the signal dies. It's the first real sign that others may exist. The hope sparks something new in Ish. He tells Emma they must find whoever sent the transmission. They pack supplies, weapons and maps and head north toward the unknown. But as they leave the camp, the camera pans back, revealing the dark outline of a man watching them from a rooftop. Someone else has survived, someone who's been following them. The screen fades to black as the eerie voice and the stranger. The film fades in with the sound of rain. Weeks have passed since Ish and Emma heard that mysterious radio voice. They travel north through California's silent valleys, once fertile lands now overrun by weeds and deer. Their jeep crawls through fallen trees and cracked asphalt. Every town looks the same, empty, hollow, echoing. Emma writes on a wall with chalk as they move through each settlement, open quote, "We are alive, heading north." Close quote, a faint hope keeps them walking. Maybe someone will read the message and follow. Maybe civilization can still be reborn. A new beginning. They finally find shelter in a small hillside neighborhood untouched by fire or looters. Houses stand quiet, food still in cans, rainwater clean. It becomes their refuge. Ish builds a generator from scavenged car batteries. Emma tends a vegetable patch behind the house. Slowly the chaos softens. Birds return to the yard. Rabbits nest under the porch. For the first time Ish smiles. Open quote, "We'll make this place our town," he says. "If anyone's out there, we'll have something waiting for them." Close quote. They hang a sign on the gate, "The home of the new." Months slip by. Other survivors appear. A mechanic named George, a nurse named Nora, a farmer couple from the valley. Each brings a different story of loss, yet each still clings to life. Together they form the first flicker of community. By winter, a dozen people live in the settlement. Fires burn again in chimneys. Children's laughter, faint but real, returns to the streets. Ish believes they've done it. Humanity is alive again. The ghosts of the old world. But rebuilding a world isn't simple. The group argues about laws, food, leadership. Should they share everything or own what they grow? Should they bury the dead they find in nearby towns or leave them? Ish wants structure, rules, democracy. Emma warns him, "The old ways are gone, Ish. If you try to rebuild the same world, you'll destroy this one too." Her words haunt him. Every time he looks at the empty skyscrapers on the horizon, he remembers how greed and science once poisoned the earth. Maybe Emma is right. Maybe the planet doesn't need men like him anymore. Still, he can't stop. He teaches the children to read. He writes down everything he remembers about electricity, farming, medicine. His notebooks pile up like holy scripture for a future that may never come. Then one afternoon, while scavenging for supplies in the outskirts, Ish spots smoke, a thin line rising from a forest a few miles away. Someone else is out there. The stranger arrives. He comes walking out of the dusk, tall, calm, his eyes hidden behind cracked sunglasses. He carries a rifle slung over his shoulder and wears a military jacket stained with dust. He calls himself Charlie. He smiles too easily. Open quote, "Heard the radio. Thought I'd find the folks who think the world still matters." Close quote. The group welcomes him cautiously. Ish questions him about where he came from. Charlie says he's been traveling west for months, living off abandoned military depots. But something about his tone feels wrong. At dinner, he laughs loudly, drinks too much and stares too long at Emma. When Ish mentions rules, sharing food, no weapons at meals, Charlie smirks. Open quote. "Rules?" The old world had rules. Look where that got us, close quote. The others exchange nervous glances. Tension in paradise. Days turn uneasy. Charlie joins the hunts but keeps most of his kills. He hoards ammo. He whispers to George and Nora about how Ish isn't a real leader, how survival needs strength, not lectures. Emma warns Ish, he's dangerous. Ish replies, he's just lost. We all are. But the settlement begins to fracture. Some follow Charlie's confident swagger. Others stay loyal to Ish's calm reason. The air grows thick with suspicion. One night, Ish wakes to find the storeroom open, several guns missing, food gone. Footprints lead to Charlie's cabin. When confronted, Charlie grins. Open quote, "I'm just taking what I earn. No one voted you king." Close quote. The argument explodes. Guns are drawn. For a moment it seems the little community, humanity's last hope, will destroy itself. Emma steps between them, her voice trembling. Open quote, "If we fight each other, the virus didn't need to kill us. We'll finish the job ourselves." Close quote. Her words pierce the tension. Charlie lowers his rifle, but his eyes promise violence yet to come. Exile by morning, the settlement gathers for judgment. Ish proposes exile, not execution. Killing would make them no better than the world that fell. Charlie laughs, spits in the dirt, and walks away into the forest, muttering, open quote, "You'll beg me to come back." Close quote. The group breathes again, but the relief is temporary. Nights feel colder now. Every creak outside sounds like footsteps. Children wake crying, saying they saw someone in the trees. Then animals begin to vanish. Goats, chickens, even dogs. Footprints circle the fences. Someone's watching them. Echoes of fear. Winter descends. Supplies run low. The group's unity fractures further. George disappears while hunting. His rifle is found near the river, blood in the snow. Ish leads a search, but they find only George's coat, bullet holes torn through it. That night, gunfire echoes from the forest, a warning shot or something worse. Emma begs Ish to abandon the camp and move south, but he refuses. If we run, we lose everything we've built. The next day, Ish finds a message carved into a wooden post near the gate. Open quote, "The earth abides, but not you." Close quote. The same phrase he heard on the radio months ago. The horror returns. The stranger is still alive, and he's not alone. At dusk, 3 figures appear on the ridge, shadows against the dying sun. Ish lifts his rifle. The camera zooms on their faces. Charlie and 2 others, armed, dirty, hungry. They shout down at the camp, demanding food, fuel, and weapons. Ish refuses. A single gunshot cracks the silence. Panic, screams. The settlers scatter. Bullets tear through windows. Fire catches in one of the houses. Ish grabs Emma, drags her toward the cellar as chaos erupts. Smoke fills the air, and through it Charlie's voice echoes. Open quote, "You can't rebuild the world, Professor. The Earth doesn't want us anymore." Close quote. Ish fires back blindly. One of Charlie's men falls. The others retreat into the dark woods, their laughter fading with the wind. When dawn comes, the settlement lies half-burned. 2 people are dead, several wounded. Emma sits among the ruins, crying quietly. Ish stares at the horizon, the sun rising over the empty hills, and whispers, open quote, "If this is what's left of mankind, maybe Emma was right. Maybe the earth is better without us." Close quote. World long gone. Civilization had crumbled completely. Cities were tombs, highways had turned to rivers of weeds, and skyscrapers stood like hollow bones of an extinct creature. Ish and his small group had survived, but survival had changed them. What began as an attempt to rebuild had become something far darker, something primitive. The survivors no longer spoke of governments, science, or cities. They spoke of omens, spirits, and the sickness that wiped humanity away. Ish had become a relic, the last man who remembered what once was. He tried to teach the children about the old world, electricity, writing, reading, but they didn't care. They hunted, fished, and lived off the land. Progress was dying before his eyes. One night Ish stood at the edge of the ruins of San Francisco, staring at the skyline silhouetted by the moon. The wind moaned through the empty buildings, almost like a voice whispering the ghosts of the past. Suddenly he heard something, a faint noise. A cough? A shuffle? Ish turned, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "Who's there?" he called. No answer, only the echo of dripping water in the hollow streets. Then, movement. A shadow darted between the cars. Ish raised his light, and for a moment he saw it. A figure, gaunt and pale, with eyes that gleamed unnaturally in the dark. Human, but not quite. He froze. "Hello?" The figure hissed softly and vanished into the blackness. Ish's heart pounded. Was it a survivor or something else? Something that the sickness changed? He told the group the next day, but they dismissed him. "You're just seeing ghosts," said Evie, one of the older survivors. But Ish knew what he'd seen. He began to patrol the outskirts at night, armed with his old rifle. He started finding signs, footprints too light for normal humans, claw marks on car doors, scraps of clothing stained with blood. Something was watching them. Weeks later, a scream pierced the night. Ish and a few others rushed to the sound. They found one of the younger men, Paul, dead beside the riverbank. His throat was torn open. The group was terrified. Ish examined the body. The wounds were jagged, almost animal-like, but too precise. "This isn't wolves," he muttered. "This is something else." After that, fear settled over the camp like fog. They built barricades and fires at night, whispering that the sickness hadn't just killed, it had mutated. The disease had left behind infected survivors, twisted, feral, nocturnal beings that roamed the ruins. One night, Ish followed strange tracks deep into the city. He descended into a subway tunnel, a graveyard of trains and bones. The stench was unbearable. In the beam of his flashlight, he saw movement. Dozens of pale shapes crouched among the debris. They hissed when the light touched them, their eyes reflected like mirrors. He realized the horrifying truth. These creatures were once human. The sickness hadn't spared them. It had changed them. Their minds were gone, replaced by hunger and instinct. They were the last echo of humanity, twisted shadows of what once ruled the earth. Ish barely escaped, stumbling back to the surface as screams followed him through the tunnels. He reached the camp, gasping, "They're real!" "They're under the city." But few believed him, until the next night. The creatures came. From the dark hills they descended, dozens of them, shrieking, clawing, tearing through the fences. Fires burned, screams filled the air, and the survivors fought desperately. Ish fired until his rifle clicked empty. Blood and smoke filled the night. When dawn came, half the camp was gone, taken or dead. The survivors who remained were broken, their faith in rebuilding utterly destroyed. Ish sat among the ruins, staring at the rising sun. Around him lay what was left of humanity, frightened, speechless, fading. He whispered to himself, "The earth doesn't belong to us anymore. It abides, but we don't." As the survivors buried their dead, Ish realized a truth more horrifying than any monster. The earth was healing. Vines grew over the wreckage, rivers ran clear again, and the sky was free of smoke. The planet was reclaiming itself, not through mankind's wisdom, but through mankind's extinction. And somewhere in the tunnels below, the creatures whispered and multiplied, waiting for the night to come again. "Would you like me to continue?" The world no longer felt like it belonged to humankind. The wind carried no sound of engines, no laughter of crowds, no rhythm of civilization, only the whispers of grass reclaiming concrete and rivers washing away the last traces of cities. The earth abided, as the title had always promised, but mankind was fading into myth. Ish had grown old. His hair, once dark and strong, had turned white like the ash that used to fall from burning cities. He walked with a cane made from the handle of an old hammer, a relic of a world that no longer remembered what tools were for. Around him, a new generation had risen. They were not his children in blood, but in survival. They hunted with spears, spoke in short, broken words, and worshipped fire as though it were a god. The sickness, the monsters, and the endless fear had erased education and logic. What remained was instinct. Every night, as Ish sat by the fire, he tried to tell them stories, of electricity, of cars, of airplanes, of how humans once touched the stars. The children would listen for a while, their faces lit by the orange glow, but then they would shake their heads and laugh. "Old Ish talks of magic," they'd whisper, "stories of ghosts." He could no longer blame them. The knowledge he carried had no place in this new world. The books were dust. The words were gone. But deep down, Ish could not give up the idea that someone had to remember. So he began to write again, in an old weathered notebook he found years ago. His handwriting was weak and shaky, but he pressed on, recording everything. The plague, the fall, the creatures, and the slow rebirth of the earth. He didn't know who would ever read it. Maybe no one. But still, he wrote. Because that's what humans did. They tried to leave something behind, even when no one was left to understand it. One night, Ish woke to the sound of thunder. But this wasn't a storm. It was the distant rumble of something unnatural, something moving through the ruins. He grabbed his rifle and flashlight, his heart pounding. The creatures had returned. He saw them in the distance, pale figures slithering between the abandoned buildings, their eyes glowing faintly. They were watching again, circling the camp like wolves around sheep. The people panicked. They screamed and ran to the fires. Ish shouted, "Hold the line! Keep the fires burning!" But fear consumed them. The creatures attacked, silent, quick, brutal. Ish fired into the darkness, the flash of his gun lighting up twisted faces that had once been human. His aim was unsteady, his breath short, but his will remained iron. The battle raged until dawn. When the light finally came, the creatures fled back into the tunnels, hissing and retreating from the sun. The camp was nearly destroyed. Many were dead. Ish collapsed beside the dying fire. Blood ran from his arm, where one of the creatures had clawed him. He knew this wound was more than physical. It was the sign of an ending. As he lay there, his vision blurred. He saw the world around him clearly for the first time in years. The trees were taller now, greener. Birds sang in the distance. Deer walked freely through the ruins of what was once San Francisco. The earth had healed. Not through science or willpower, but through absence. He smiled faintly. "We were never the masters," he whispered. "Only the guests." Evie, one of the last remaining from the old days, came to his side. She held his hand. "Rest, Ish. You've done enough." He shook his head weakly. "No. The earth has done enough. It abides. It always will." He handed her his notebook, pages filled with fading ink, trembling words, and memories of a civilization long gone. "Keep it safe," he said. "Even if no one can read it, someone will feel it." Evie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise." And then Ish closed his eyes for the last time. The fire crackled softly beside him. The sun rose, golden and indifferent, washing over the ruins of humanity. Days later, the survivors buried him beneath a lone oak tree that had grown through the cracked pavement. They placed the notebook at the roots, sealed in a glass jar. Over time, moss grew over the grave, and the forest swallowed the last traces of their camp. Generations passed. The infected creatures, too, eventually vanished. Perhaps they starved, perhaps they evolved into something else entirely. The earth moved on, silent and eternal. One day, centuries later, a wanderer, perhaps a descendant of Ish's tribe, discovered the old notebook beneath the tree. The pages were fragile, the words barely visible, but one line remained clear, untouched by time. Open quote, "The earth abides. Men come and go, but the earth remains." Close quote. The wanderer didn't understand the language, but he felt the weight of it. He touched the page, looked up at the endless sky, and smiled. The last light of mankind had faded, but in that light the earth still breathed, still lived, and still abided. The end.